if you're having trouble with any audio, you can use this information on the screen now to call in via your phone to make sure you have all the audio and there's no issues. We're also going to have a question and answer. There's a Q&A function where you can submit questions that we will address and talk about at the end of the webinar. While some of us on the webinar are attorneys and law students, this webinar is not intended to be legal advice, and it does not constitute legal advice. So that's just a disclaimer to put out there for everyone. And so before we start, we're just going to do a few quick polls that'll pop up on the screen just so we can get a sense of our audience tonight. So we'll start with the first question, the first poll. So this first question is just, in what capacity are you attending this webinar? A professional capacity, personal capacity? Are you a volunteer for organization or some other affiliation, or is there some other capacity by which you're attending? We'll give a minute or so for people to answer. And we'll check out the results for this one. So it looks like a lot of people are here in a professional capacity, as well as a good mix of everything else. So that's good. I hope this webinar will be informative to everyone. I think it's going to be good for all people that are attending today. So now we'll go to the next question, the next poll. So this question is just, what is your familiarity with stormwater? A lot, a little, or none at all? Just so we can see where everyone's at in terms of the subject matter of the presentation today. So give a minute for people to answer. All right, check out the results for that one. A lot and a little seems to be the most of the answers, so that's good. So I think this, again, will still be informative to everyone who knows a lot, and hopefully we can provide some tips and strategies and some resources for how to be involved in this comment and the permit renewal. So now we'll just do the one last poll question before we get started. And this last question is just, what type of environment do you live in? Is it an urban environment, a rural environment, or a suburban environment? We'll just wait a minute to get the answers. All right, let's see the answers. All right, so it looks like most of you live in an urban environment or a suburban environment. No responses for rural. So that as you'll hear today, this permit and the facilities that use this permit are generally clustered in the urban and suburban environments. So we hope to have a lot of good information for you all today. So that's the end of our polls. And now I will kick it over to our two main presenters this evening, Abby and Colin.
How's it going, everybody? My name's Colin, and I'm here with the University of Maryland Law Clinic. We can do a quick introduction of all the panelists on the call. If we want to just close down the presentation real quick, and they can turn on their videos. So looks like everybody's on. Like I said, my name's Colin. I'm from the Environmental Law Clinic. We're really happy to have you here today, and hopefully, we can, everybody can learn a little bit more about industrial stormwater and ways we can take some action. And I will pass it on to Alice, so from Blue Water Baltimore, so she can give a quick introduction.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I know you can hear my daughter screaming in the background, so apologies for that. That is the reason why I'll probably be off camera and silent for the majority of the presentation. But my name is Alice Valpita. I am your Baltimore Harbor waterkeeper. So we, as a part of Blue Water Baltimore, our mission is really to protect and restore local waterways that flow into the Patapsco and Back Rivers. I'm going to go on mute now because of my daughter. But thank you, everybody, for joining today. Really appreciate it.
Abby, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Giljen Rogers, and I'm also with the University of Maryland Environmental Law Clinic, and it is great to have you all here today.
Great, and Shayna?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shayna Roth-Gormley. I'm an attorney at Community Law Center, and Community Law Center is a legal services provider for nonprofit organizations. So we work with community groups and nonprofits throughout Maryland on whatever legal issues they're having. So that can include environmental topics like we're going to cover tonight. So if your community association or other group is looking for legal services on these issues or other legal issues, please reach out, and I'd be happy to talk more about how Community Law Center can help connect the organization with an attorney.
All right. And with that, we'll begin the presentation.
Okay. So tonight we will be talking about industrial stormwater and how it can affect you, the permit process. So for logistics, how long will the presentation take? The presentation will be about 1 hour with questions from the audience to follow. Where can questions be submitted? As previously mentioned, throughout the presentation, if you have a question, please submit it in the chat box and questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Will these slides be available after the presentation? Yes, these slides will be provided to all attendees as well as a resource document, which will include a comment template. The goals of the presentation are to define industrial stormwater, define the Clean Water Act and the permit process, understand community impacts, learn from the importance of community action, and learn how to take part in the permit process. So to achieve these goals, this presentation will cover industrial stormwater in Baltimore. How does this affect public health? How does it affect the health of waterways? How does this connect to our communities? Then we will discuss the background on the Clean Water Act. What is a permit? How do permits help limit pollution? How do we stay informed? How does the community participate in a comment? Next, we will go over the current state of the Maryland draft industrial stormwater permit. Lastly, we will discuss community engagement and involvement. How can a community take part in the permit process? And what are the procedures and next steps? Before we dive into that material, Colin will briefly discuss the importance of commenting on an industrial stormwater permit.
Thanks, Abby. Why are we here today and why should we comment on the industrial stormwater permit? So industrial stormwater, in its most basic terms, is the water that washes away from an industrial facility after it rains that carries harmful chemicals and heavy metals into our waterways, stormwater systems, and onto local properties. Water pollution in Maryland and in the country is governed by water pollution permits, and the current permit for industrial stormwater in Maryland is up for renewal. It covers over 800 facilities in the state of Maryland and is critical to imposing pollution limits and restrictions on these polluters. But the current and proposed new permits lack the proper mechanisms to protect public health and environmental health. In Maryland and in Baltimore, these facilities are clustered in low-income communities and communities of color, exposing residents to harmful toxic chemicals and metals that were washed away from these facilities. And these harmful effects, in combination with other environmental threats that already exist in these areas, pose serious risks to these already disenfranchised communities. So, commenting on the new permit by providing written testimony gives community members the opportunity to have an impact before the permit is implemented. Because general permits are only up for renewal every 5 years, by acting through a permit comment, affected individuals can create structural change and vast positive impacts by strengthening the protections provided to communities and the environment for years to come. It is our goal today to provide the tools and a greater understanding of industrial stormwater and the permit process so you can comment on the industrial stormwater permit during this upcoming renewal process. Along with this presentation, we will provide you with a comment template and other resources so we can empower you to have your voice heard. And now that we've gone over that, I'll just pass it over to Abby so she can discuss industrial stormwater and its effects a little bit more.
Great. So as you just heard from Colin, although the permit applies to all of Maryland, tonight we will be focusing on Baltimore as a case study. Based on the Maryland Department of the Environment, or MDE data, there are 112 industrial facilities in Baltimore City. Put differently, Baltimore is home to 1/8 of the industrial facilities in Maryland. The map of Baltimore City shown here is from the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA's Enforcement and Compliance History Online database, also known as ECHO. This database is a web-based tool that is available to the public to use. We will discuss ECHO later in the presentation and provide you with more information on how to access it. But for now, we will show you some maps that we got from the database to help with our discussion. In the map on the right, each box reflects an industrial facility covered under the industrial stormwater permit, with the blue boxes showing no violation identified, yellow boxes showing a violation was identified, and red boxes showing a significant violation has been identified. So now that you have a reference for the density of industrial facilities in Baltimore, I'm going to talk to you about industrial stormwater in Baltimore. So what is industrial stormwater? Industrial stormwater is made up of 3 parts. At industrial facilities, things like storage and handling, equipment maintenance and cleaning, and other activities are exposed to the weather. Runoff from precipitation, like rain and snow, that lands on industrial activity sites becomes contaminated with harmful materials that were exposed to the weather. The harmful materials picked up from these sites by rainwater then enter local waterways and can include chemicals such as polychlorinated biphenyl, also known as PCBs, which are listed as a probable carcinogen by EPA, toxic and heavy metals such as lead, zinc, copper, and cadmium, and other carcinogenic substances like polybrominated diphenyl ethers, also known as PBDEs, which are a neurotoxin, thyroid disruptor, and potential carcinogen, which one study found in soil and dust samples, as well as blood samples from individuals who lived within 100 meters of an auto and metal recycling facility. So what is an industrial activity? The categories of facilities that produce the stormwater just described are heavy manufacturing, including paper mills, chemical plants, and steel mills, coal and mineral mining and oil and gas exploration, hazardous waste treatment, storage, and disposal facilities, landfills, recycling facilities, including metal scrap yards, salvage yards, and auto junk yards. It includes steam electric power facilities and transportation facilities that have vehicle maintenance, equipment cleaning, or airport de-icing operations. It also includes construction sites, and lastly, light manufacturing operations such as food processing, printing and publishing, public warehousing, and storage. So as a refresher, this is the same map that was shown before. Each box reflects an industrial facility covered under the industrial stormwater permit, with blue showing no violation, yellow showing a violation was identified, and red showing a significant violation has been identified. Of the types of industrial facilities just mentioned on the last slide, metal scrap recycling sites and salvage yards and landfills are abundant in Baltimore and most frequently require corrective action for exceeding permitted pollution levels. This map also highlights environmental justice issues. The Maryland Department of the Environment defines environmental justice as the concept that all people, regardless of their race, color, national origin, or income, are able to enjoy equally high levels of environmental protection. Low-income and minority communities are most vulnerable to these issues. Oftentimes, environmental justice communities are home to a disproportionate amount of polluting facilities, putting residents at a much higher risk for health problems from environmental exposure. This is called an overburdened community. The next 2 slides will look specifically at the interconnection between industrial facilities and how low income and minority populations in Baltimore. So this is the same map of facilities from ECHO previously shown, but now is overlaid with a filter depicting the distribution of low-income communities in the city. A low-income community is defined as a household where the household income is less than or equal to twice the federal poverty level. The federal poverty level is a yearly income of $12,790 for an individual or $25,100 for a family of 4. The color block shown represents a percent of a block group's population that is low income. So for red, it's 95 to 100% low income. Orange is 90 to 95, yellow 80 to 90%, dark gray is 70 to 80%, and each lighter shade of gray decreases by 10%, with the lightest being less than 50% low income. Low income neighborhoods in East and South Baltimore are surrounded by the densest concentration of industrial stormwater sites. There are 39 of these facilities in East Baltimore alone. Industrial stormwater disproportionately impacts low-income communities in Baltimore, a historically overburdened environmental justice community. So again, this is the same map of facilities from ECHO, but this time it's overlaid with a filter depicting the distribution of minority populations in the city. A minority population is defined as the percent of individuals in a block group who list their racial status as a race other than white alone and/or list their ethnicity as Hispanic or Latino. Put in simpler terms, it accounts for people other than non-Hispanic white alone individuals, white alone indicating that the person is of a single race and not multiracial. Again, this is the same color block as before, and it represents the percent of a block group's population that is minority. Red being 95 to 100% minority, orange being 90 to 95%, yellow 80 to 90%, dark gray 70 to 80%, and each lighter shade of gray decreases by 10%, with the lightest being less than 50% minority. Again, note the dense cluster of facilities in red and orange areas, which this time denotes a high percentage of minority population. The takeaway here is that there is a dense clusters of industrial facilities which disproportionately impacts environmental justice communities in Baltimore. So how exactly are they impacted? There are 4 major impacts to communities. First, communities experience exposure to harmful chemicals from PCBs coming from industrial sites washing into the water. PCB levels are particularly high in urban watersheds, including those surrounding Baltimore. There are also harmful chemicals that attach to dust particles carried by the wind and land in people's homes and lungs. An example of this is lead dust can become airborne and is more readily absorbed into the body than lead ingested from paint chips. Stormwater is also a major source of fecal bacteria and other waterborne illnesses. And lastly, stormwater from industrial facilities conveys chemical pollutants that are toxic to aquatic life, disrupting growth and reproduction and killing fish and other animals. The next impact is polluted waterways. This results in restrictions on fishing, boating, and swimming in local waterways that are polluted. This means people are unable to eat fish that are caught and cannot swim in certain areas. Another impact is unregulated stormwater flows. This results in property damage from flooded roads, cars, and homes. Additionally, there can be sewage backups into homes. Baltimore has an old sanitary system that is combined with stormwater drains. Therefore, increased stormwater runoff from industrial facilities contributes to the high number of sewage backups in people's homes experienced by Baltimore residents. Lastly, there are the compounded impacts from climate change and environmental justice. Climate change will bring more intense and frequent rainstorms in the coming years, which means the problems mentioned above are going to get worse if not properly addressed. There are also compounded environmental justice impacts from additional pollutant sources in an area, such as air pollution and lead exposure. Overburdened communities often experience higher rates of respiratory disease, cancer, and other degenerative and developmental illnesses. From the maps just shown, it is evident that uncontrolled industrial stormwater runoff in Baltimore will disproportionately impact low-income and minority populations in the city. So now that you know what industrial stormwater is and how it impacts Baltimore, Colin will discuss the background on the Clean Water Act.
Thanks, Abby. So now that we better understand the impacts of industrial stormwater, we will talk about the Clean Water Act, permits, and how individuals take part in the permit writing process. So the Clean Water Act serves to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's water. And this was the first major law passed in the United States to address water pollution and was drafted in response to growing concerns in the 1960s of water pollution harms. And as you see from the image on the screen, one particular event set the act into motion when the pollution in the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught on fire, causing tens of thousands of dollars in damages. So what is in the Clean Water Act? The Clean Water Act includes a range of provisions and policies to build a framework for water pollution control. This framework includes financial assistance for water infrastructure and technology development, setting of water quality standards, enforcement of pollution control compliance, and most importantly, what is called the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. So this system prohibits or makes it illegal to discharge pollution into our waterways unless directly permitted through what is called a NPDES permit. But today we'll just refer to them as water pollution permits. So what is a water pollution permit? A water pollution permit is a required permit for anyone discharging any types of pollution into waterways. And one way to think about it is like a driver's license. It grants a privilege to the permit holder, allowing them to discharge certain levels of pollution into waterways. So this serves a few purposes, but it allows for agencies to track the amount of pollutants and what types of pollutants are entering waterways. And it also allows for enforcement. If a permit holder is found to be in violation of the permit, they are subject to penalties and criminal enforcement. And it's critical that these permits exist because without proper control of pollution, our waterways would become oversaturated with pollutants, leading to serious harm to ecosystems and public health, which in turn prevents access to clean drinking water and use of our waterways. So a few other things, what is in a water pollution permit? A water pollution permit includes several requirements such as limits on pollution, so types and quantities of pollutants, so things like lead, nitrogen, and sediment. It includes reporting and monitoring requirements, such as permit holders must monitor the water leaving the facility and report this data to MDE. The permit also requires best management practice for industries, requirements for stormwater prevention plans, and other provisions to protect water quality. And in Maryland, these permits are administered by the Maryland Department of the Environment, or MDE. And here's an example of what a permit looks like. And obviously we don't expect you to read through it right now, but as you can see on the screen, it includes information on who the permit applies to, so applicability. It also includes inspection and monitoring requirements, like I just mentioned, and pollution limits for different types of facilities. For example, automobile salvage yards, which are all around Baltimore. The parameters there show a benchmark or a limit on pollution for iron, lead, aluminum, as well as certain requirements for testing. Now that we understand what a permit is, we want to talk about the difference between a general permit and an individual permit. So water pollution permits come in two different forms, and those are either individual or general permits. And individual permits are generally particularized for specific sites and have tailored requirements. So this includes specific pollution limits, generally more transparency of discharge data, as well as stronger mechanisms for public participation. On the other hand, there are general permits, which cover a group of specific polluters. So for example, the industrial stormwater permit, which this presentation is about today, is a general permit, and it covers industrial facilities in the state of Maryland. So the general permit is used for efficiency's sake and assumes that all industry needs are the same because they have similar stormwater discharges. For example, it assumes that a landfill in Baltimore has the same needs the same limits on pollution as a landfill in, say, Prince George's County. So all facilities that qualify for a specific general permit apply for coverage under it. So for example, all qualifying industrial facilities apply for coverage under this general permit. And most facilities in Maryland are permitted under a general permit. There are 800 facilities, industrial facilities, or more than that actually, that are covered under the current industrial stormwater permit. And because it has such a broad impact, by covering so many facilities, it provides a unique opportunity for structural change through a comment or through participation, because strengthening this stormwater permit or strengthening a general permit that covers so many facilities has a very large impact. So now we know what a general permit is. I just want to go through the steps to renewing a general permit, and I want to focus a little bit on where the public comes into play. So to renew or issue a new permit in MDE generally goes through several steps, and it begins through, or I should say, federal law requires that all water pollution permits are renewed every 5 years. And that means that MDE must start their process every 5 years for a general permit. So, you know, the last permit was from 2015, it's ending now, and now it needs to be renewed. So what happens is MDE drafts the permit, then releases it for public review, and this triggers what is called a public notice and comment period, which is generally required to be 30 days, but typically is extended. In the case of the industrial stormwater permit, it's 90 days. And during this time, interested parties such as individuals, community groups, industries, and organizations can submit comments or participate in public hearings to express their views. And this notice and comment period is mandated by law and is critical to government transparency and community participation. It serves the purpose of allowing the community to take part, or individuals and the public to take part in this process. And now, so once the notice and comment period has ended and all public comments have been submitted to MDE, MDE is required to review the public comments and evaluate the comments to introduce changes to the permit. And once this whole process is over, a final permit is issued, and interested parties that took part in the process, in the comment process, may appeal a permit if they're unsatisfied and take the appeal to court. So now that we have an understanding of permits, you know, how they're renewed, that the whole process, I want to talk about how we stay informed about permits and how we track permits once they're in place. So on MDE's website, MDE posts when a new permit is issued or posts notices of a draft permit renewal, which gives access to the public to and keeps them informed of when new permits are coming out or being renewed. As well as that, MDE also allows individuals to subscribe to an email newsletter that provides updates on permits. And we will be providing all this information to you so you can access it yourself. And one note before we move on, I just want to say, if you feel that, you know, it's not enough, that they just post on their website or whatever it may be, or they you know, that you're subscribing to a newsletter, that's something important to note. You know, if you're only finding out about this because some groups wanted to host a webinar on the industrial stormwater permit, that's something that you can comment on and that you can bring up to MD and say, hey, I want more transparency so I'm aware of what's going on in my my neighborhood or my community. So how do we track permits once they are operating? Like we mentioned earlier, permits have requirements to monitor and report discharge information. This information includes information on the facility, as well as types of pollutants and amounts of pollutants. And this information is made available online through the Enforcement and Compliance History Online, or ECHO. It's a mouthful. And this is a web tool developed by the EPA that provides public access to permit information. And this website is a great tool for interested individuals because it allows you to input your zip code or address to see what permitted facilities are around you and information about their permit, including, you know, if they're above their, you know, pollution limits or whatever it may be. And with our resources today, once again, we will provide more information on how to access ECHO so you can see what's going on around you and investigate for yourself. And this is an important part of the process. Seeing and actually looking into what's going on around you is important, because then you can be more informed and actually want to take action, because you realize that, you know, you're affected more than you think. All right, so now that we've discussed what industrial stormwater is, what a permit is, and how the public participates, Abby will discuss a few of the specific requirements and provisions in the industrial stormwater permit.
Thanks. So the Maryland General Permit for discharges of stormwater associated with industrial activity. As a reminder, although we are using Baltimore as a case study in this presentation, this permit applies to all of Maryland. As Colin just mentioned, these permits must be renewed every 5 years. The previous discharge permit in Maryland was effective from January 1st, 2014 to December 31st, 2018. It was extended through 2020. A new draft discharge permit was released for comment on January 14th, 2021. So the important permit sections for the draft permit are Part 2, the approval requirements, Part 3, the stormwater management requirements, Part 4, corrective actions, and Part 5, the inspections, monitoring, and reporting. I'm going to briefly cover these sections so you have a sense of what the permit covers and what it does. So Part 2, approval requirements. This section includes the important requirements to hold facilities accountable and understand what is being released that could potentially impact communities. It establishes how to obtain authorization to release water from a facility, known as a discharge. A facility must submit a notice of intent to MDE, which can be seen on the right. It also outlines the deadlines for coverage of the permit, which includes notification. It also includes notification requirements for when a facility must notify MDE prior to engaging in an activity that is covered under the permit. So the next part, Part 3, stormwater management requirements. These requirements are the main enforcement provisions for industrial facilities. The Chesapeake Bay restoration requirements. This section includes measures to reduce nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment from entering runoff. The draft permit requires the facility to restore 20% of impervious surface areas like parking lots, into green spaces and drainage areas. This is a reduction from the previous permit commitment to provide a 20% impervious surface reduction for each permit cycle. This section also includes control measures and pollution limits, and it has a stormwater pollution prevention plan. By implementing these requirements, it prevents stormwater from leaving a facility and polluting local waterways. So next is Part 4, the corrective actions. This part of the permit details the conditions that require review and revision to eliminate a problem and to determine if modifications to the facility are necessary to keep the problem from occurring again. It also includes corrective action deadlines and reporting requirements. Lastly, it establishes the effect of a corrective action. This section is important because it limits offsite pollution. If corrective actions are effectively taken, then it reduces the impact on downstream communities. So last up is Part 5, inspections, monitoring, and reporting. This part requires site inspections and evaluations to be conducted by each facility on a quarterly basis. It includes industry-specific pollution monitoring requirements. As an example, landfills have different requirements than salvage yards. It also outlines monitoring procedures during large storm events. Lastly, it includes a records retention provision that requires a facility to keep certain records for at least 3 years. Without more robust requirements, MDE can be left unaware about some stormwater runoff from industrial facilities and the resulting community impacts. So that was a lot of information about the technical aspects of the draft permit, and there will be several groups commenting on those aspects. However, for communities, it is important to remember how the permit could be impacting you on a daily basis. So here's a refresher from earlier on the 4 major impacts to communities. Communities experience increased exposure to harmful chemicals from PCBs coming from industrial sites washing into water and chemicals attaching to dust particles carried by the wind and land in people's homes and lungs. Polluted waterways results in restrictions on fishing, boating, swimming in local waterways. There's also impacts from unregulated stormwater flows, which results in property damage from flooded roads, cars, and homes, and sewage backups into homes. Lastly, there are the compounded impacts of climate change and environmental justice. If you live near an industrial facility, it is important for MDE to hear from you what you are seeing, smelling, or hearing. You can get involved in the permit process and tell your personal story about how industrial facilities impact you. Telling your story can help MDE strengthen the permit requirements. What you're experiencing matters, and MDE needs to hear your voices. So now that you know about the draft permit and how it impacts you, Colin will discuss community engagement and involvement.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. And you know, this is important. And we keep talking about the comment, and now we're going to learn what a comment is. So as discussed earlier, during the notice and comment period of a permit renewal, individuals can submit comments to MDE to provide feedback on a permit. So a comment is written or oral testimony that is provided to MDE. And the comments can include positive and negative feedback, but mainly serve the purpose of informing MDE about information or things that have been left out or need to be considered. So this can include a range of things. It can include technical data, you know, identifying permit or pollution issues backed by, scientific data or whatever it may be. It can include solutions such as, you know, saying that certain provisions need to be strengthened or whatever it may be. But one thing that generally is missing when it comes to what MDE is informed about is personal narratives or personal experiences that people have, you know, living in Baltimore or living in Prince George's County or living wherever in Maryland or you know, by industrial facilities, what they experience, you know, stories from those directly affected that illustrate a perspective that MDE may not have considered. And these comments are critical because they are required to be considered. And in many ways, they're the only chance for communities to be heard by MDE for potentially 5 to 7 years. You know, it's the job of us as commenters to hold MDE accountable. And unlike your elected officials, the permit writers at MDE don't get, you know, elected out of office or whatever it may be, which means that this is one of the very few times in the permit process that we can take part. So like I mentioned, a few reasons why it's important or why the public should participate in writing comments. For the public, it increases community understanding of local pollution threats. You know, taking time to look at ECHO or learn about industrial stormwater allows us to take more informative actions. It gives the opportunity to have our voices heard and have community voices heard. Like I said, you know, this is one of the few chances that MDE gets a chance to, you know, hear from us. As well as that, it allows for participation by those that are directly affected, and it fosters relationships with decision makers and creates potential for greater community engagement in the future. We take an action today and come together, you know, to comment on industrial stormwater. Down the line, we'll be able to take more informed actions. And as well as that, for the agency, it's important too. It provides information for MDE so that they, you know, consider and cover all their bases. It helps to create informed decision making, and it serves as a check to agency power, like I mentioned. So now we'll discuss a few comment strategies. So comments can come in different forms and can be used to convey different information to MDE. So legal policy comments or technical comments generally are what you see from organizations like the Environmental Law Clinic, Chesapeake Legal Alliance, or Blue Water Baltimore, right? And these are more common when it comes to the comment process. So they include arguments that maybe a provision is illegal under the Clean Water Act, or they use scientific data to back up, you know, better pollution parameters and things like that. But like I mentioned, narrative comments are not, you know, seen a lot by MDE. When we were drafting this presentation, we tried to look and find in other permit renewal processes comments that came from community members, and it was hard for us. It was hard to find them. So narrative comments are really important, and they present a narrative from individuals directly affected by pollution and create a perspective that, like I said, MDE typically does not see. So this does include personal experiences, so sights or smells, and can focus on the harms directly to the surrounding area and to the community. So for example, if you experience, a funny smell coming from a local facility, or you saw water running across the street that was coming from, a landfill or an automobile salvage yard that was discolored and just didn't look right. These are the experiences that we want to be talking about, and putting it in your comment to MDE allows them to know that you are experiencing effects from industrial facilities firsthand, and that they're real and that they're important to you. And so here we have an example narrative comment. And obviously we don't expect you to read through this right now. The paragraphs on the right of the screen are portions of the comment template that we will provide to you after this presentation. But we just want to outline a structure for you. And this is really all a permit comment has to look like. Maybe a technical comment or a policy comment would be 40 pages. But for us, or for a narrative comment, it really only needs to be a few paragraphs. A few sentences is really all it's needed, is just to have your point come across. So the basic structure, it begins with introducing yourself and introducing what permit you're commenting on, and if you're commenting on behalf of an organization. That's not required, but it always helps to have the backing of an organization. As well as that, state why you're commenting and how industrial stormwater affects you and your community. These are your personal experiences. These are, how you represent MD, why it's important, and then potentially suggest ways that the permit could be strengthened. And we'll help you with this with the permit comment template that we will provide. But it's up to MDE to come up with these solutions. It's not on you, but you being able to say, hey, this needs to be strengthened because I'm seeing discolored things or whatever. I've experienced flooding and I'm worried about the industrial stormwater runoff that may have entered my home. These are important things to discuss. So to reiterate again, how to draft a comment. So you want to start by introducing yourself, indicate your position towards the permit, explain how the permit and pollution will directly impact you and your community, and then identify issues that you faced in areas where you think it should be strengthened to help you and protect public health. And a few tips, it's important to be clear and concise and effective, and just get right to the point and represent examples of your experience. And as well as that, at the end of the day, you just want to provide a new perspective for MD and show them what's going on. So like I said, throughout this presentation, we will be providing resources and that will be sent to you within the coming day. But in those resources will include a comment template, which will be an outline to how you should structure your comment, and we'll include provision or paragraphs and areas where you can fill in your own information, your own experiences. We do make it really easy with the comment template. You could just fill in your name and some of that information and submit it that way. But we really do recommend you take a few minutes, search on Echo, see what industrial facilities are around you, and consider writing, personal experience so that, you can strengthen the comment. As well as that, we'll provide information on how to access Echo, that website that shows all the facilities that we talked about. And we'll also provide a few other resources to help you keep informed. And then important dates. So there is a public hearing for the draft permit that is coming up on March 3rd. And obviously that's only 2 days away, and we don't expect you to, have prepared oral comments for that, but it's a public hearing, so people give public testimony in opposition or support of the comment or the permit. And if you wanted to testify, you could use the permit comment template that we're sending you as kind of a reference, but even if you don't testify, it's a good opportunity to listen to hear what other people are saying. And then of course the written comment, which is very important, is due by April 19th. And we'll provide the contact information for that, but you want to make sure you're sending it to the right individual at MDE. So next steps, complete the comment template and submit your comment to MDE by April 19th. represent your personal experience and have your voice heard. It's great to be a part of a process where you could potentially, create a change. As well as that, take part in the public hearing on March 3rd if you can. And then we will provide information to look up your local representatives. If this issue is really important to you, it's great to talk to your local representatives and elected officials. And here's everybody's contact information of the panelists, and we will be sharing this with you. And with that, that's going to conclude our presentation. We really, really enjoyed doing this for all of you, and hopefully you guys and the attendees learned a little bit more about industrial stormwater, how you can take part in the process, and hopefully you'll submit a comment. And now we're going to transition to to questions that individuals have provided.
Thanks, Colin and Abby. That was great. And we had a couple questions, and also we had a couple questions that were emailed in prior to this. So we have about 10 minutes. So let's address, I think the students can address a couple of these comments that we had emailed in. The first one was, I'm not a resident of Baltimore, but I live outside of the city. Can I comment on this permit as well? I'll let one of the students answer if you'd like.
Yeah, I can answer. So yeah, no matter where you live in Maryland, you can comment on the permit and express your views. While there are a lot of industrial facilities located in Baltimore, there are also facilities all over the state, including, in total in the state, there is over 800. So it's more than likely you live close or know someone who lives close to a industrial facility. And these all have effects on environmental and public health. So, like we recommended, a great way to kind of educate yourself or inform yourself is by going on to Echo and searching your area and just kind of investigating, looking around, seeing what facilities are around you. And even if you don't live close to a facility, submitting a comment that generally talks about the issues and their effects can help protect your fellow community members and, environmental health as well.
Thanks, Colin. So another one we had emailed in was, can I share this information with other groups or individuals? And I'm assuming by this information, they mean what we'll be sharing out with everyone.
You want to do this one, Abby? I'm willing to talk all day, so I'm sure people are getting sick of my voice.
You grabbed this when I was answering the one in the chat, getting ready, if you want to take it.
Okay, yeah, so the goal of this presentation is to get the word out and have people participate. So any information that we provide from this, feel free to share it with your friends, share it with your church group, share it with whatever community groups you're associated with, because the more people that know, the more people that are informed, the better actions can be taken. So feel free to share the comment template or the instructions to Echo or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that CLA will post, we will post this presentation along with all the documents, and the clinic will as well. So if you're representing an organization or you're concerned about someone who you want to see all of this, you can definitely forward them the links that we post or the emails that we send out afterwards, can be sent out. So another question we got in from the presentation was, what is the Chesapeake Bay restoration requirement in the permit? And then what impact does this requirement have on me as a community member? And I think Abby wants to address that question.
So the Chesapeake Bay restoration requirement, it applies to all facilities in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and facilities must comply with the nutrient reduction requirements within the permit. And so the main goal is to reduce the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment from entering into the bay with stormwater runoff. And a strong requirement for this, it reduces the amount of these pollutants from getting into the bay, and this impacts community members by creating a cleaner and healthier Chesapeake Bay. So if you've ever heard in the summer about a dead zone in the Chesapeake Bay, in an area where you can't fish or you can't swim, This is due to excess nutrients coming into the bay from stormwater runoff. So a stronger requirement here would reduce the size and impact of a dead zone.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, thanks, Abby, that the restoration requirement is one of the requirements in the permit that is the most effective at what Abby was just saying, which is reducing the polluted runoff coming off site. So while it has basically its benefits are twofold, it's helping water quality by limiting pollution, but it's also limiting the interaction between community and fence line and communities around these facilities with actually interacting with the polluted stormwater. So essentially, the more impervious surface that's been restored on a site, the more water and runoff that will be retained on that site, which means it won't be leaving the site, which means it won't be coming in contact with the communities or polluting water quality. So it's one of the most effective ways of both of protecting water quality and protecting the community community impacts. So we have another question here that was typed into the chat. So with regard to the 3 types of public comments, was there any research done into the effectiveness of each type? As a community organizer and a person who has participated in numerous public comment periods, I have not found them to affect that much change in the facilities, practices, or policies. So I mean, I can address that question, and that's a really good question. CLA and I have not done any specific research on these types of comments. Those categories are sort of how we organize them in the advocacy field in terms of trying to generate involvement. And I will share the frustration that oftentimes it feels like the comments are ignored, but that's not a reason to not submit them, because having your comments in the administrative record for the decision that the state's going to make means that if you were to challenge the permit or there was some other issue with it, your objections or your concerns with the permit have been preserved and available for legal challenge. And I would also say that one of the reasons we had this community, or we're having this webinar right now, is to generate more different types of and diverse types of comments that the state is going to receive on this permit, because the state they do hear a lot of comments about policy and that type of stuff, and they know that they're going to get a very robust comment from organizations like Chesapeake Legal Alliance and Blue Water Baltimore. And so that's why we're trying to get more community-based comments involved here. And so I know that doesn't directly answer the question, but I hope that this encourages you to to be involved and continue to work with public comments. And if you have more questions, you can certainly contact any of us here. So I have another question. We only have a couple more minutes. So someone asked about, it says here, Prince George's County has a lot of construction going on in transportation. Should communities be concerned about water runoff? Should communities be concerned about water runoff and storms and otherwise from those sites? And of course they should. There's different types of pollution that comes from construction sites, but Maryland also has a different type of permit that pertains to construction sites. And so if you are concerned specifically about construction stormwater pollution runoff, I suggest you can reach out to me at Chesapeake Legal Alliance. The state actually already went through the process of renewing their general permit for construction stormwater. So while the comment period is closed, there is still lots of information out there that we could provide to you. And if you're having trouble with construction stormwater, we can potentially assist you. So for that person who has that question, please feel free to reach out to me, at Chesapeake Legal Alliance. We only have a couple more minutes, so I don't know if if Alice or Shanna, you want to just give any information about your organizations real quick. I'll just say real quick, Chesapeake Legal Alliance is a nonprofit organization, and we work with individuals and other organizations in the Chesapeake Bay watershed to protect water quality and protect the communities that use the Bay watershed. So, we provide free legal services to all sorts of entities and individuals. So if you're concerned about something, feel free to reach out to me and check out the Chesapeake Legal Alliance website. So Alice.
So I'll jump in really quickly. I also wanted to address this comment about pollution coming off of construction sites, because that dovetails really nicely into one of the services that Baltimore Harbor Waterkeeper, but also waterkeepers throughout the entire Chesapeake region are delivering to their communities, which is acting as a point of contact to report different types of pollution that's negatively impacting local waterways. So unfortunately, Prince George's County is a little bit out of my jurisdiction, but there is a waterkeeper who serves the Patuxent River watershed that may be in part of PG County. And, you know, if you check out Waterkeepers Chesapeake, that is kind of the umbrella organization where you can find information for waterkeepers throughout the entire Chesapeake region. But we maintain a pollution reporting hotline. So if you see something, and even if you're not exactly sure if it's industrial, stormwater pollution, or you know, good old fashioned point source pollution, please reach out and let us know about it, because as a waterkeeper organization, we can take legal action under the Clean Water Act to enforce clean water laws. And the thing that gives us the power to do that is our legal standing to be the voice of our local waterways and our members. So really the people who are directly impacted by waterway pollution as members of Blue Water Baltimore, that's who we're representing when we take legal action against polluters. So I know that was a lot, but I really appreciate, I just want to say thank you to Colin and Abby for this presentation. Also, it was great. And I've been at Blue Water Baltimore for 7 years, and I'm always learning new stuff. So I think you made this really approachable for everybody. Thank you.
Yes, I want to echo that. Thank you. This is not an area that I'm especially familiar with, and I know that it can be, environmental law in general can be really confusing and complex. So it's great to have all of you helping navigate for communities. So just a little bit about Community Law Center. We provide legal advice to nonprofit organizations, and we can help represent nonprofits on environmental issues, including on commenting on stormwater permits, like talked about in this presentation. So there was a question in the chat about how to meet and connect with other people from the community who are interested in commenting or, you know, thinking about these issues. And we always really recommend getting involved with and getting in touch with your local community association and other neighborhood groups, institutions in your neighborhood and your community, as well as all the organizations that are presenting tonight, because I think that's a good way to just see who else is talking about these issues, who else is experiencing issues with stormwater and runoff and industrial pollution in the neighborhood. And then from there, you can build on those efforts and say, well, here's one way that we can really take action. And so that's something that, you know, this can be a jumping off point for a lot of that work, and you can build something, you know, in the longer term. So, you know, it can be a much longer term organizing effort, and as well as, you know, the shorter timelines that we have for commenting right now. But for legal services on these and other issues, definitely reach out to Community Law Center. And you have my information there, my email, and you can also check out our website, which is communitylaw.org, and happy to talk more about legal resources for various legal issues.
Thanks, Shana. All right. I also will echo thanks to the students who did a great job. And thanks to everyone for attending today. You know, we've hit our time limit, and I really appreciate all the involvement and the questions, and everyone who attended. And like we said, this will all be recorded, and the information and resources will be sent out in a couple days. And just again, there will be a public comment hearing before MDE this Wednesday, where you can make your voices heard on this permit. And if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. So thanks, everybody, and have a good evening.